Whether your team is your family, your business, or your employees, staying connected is crucial. You can depend on the Cross Insurance family
Very good.
to provide the best insurance solutions for you. We've got your team protected. Visit crossagency.com today.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Marty and the Whites and the Globe Sustainability Week. We are so happy to have you all here. I'm Janae Osterholt, Boston Globe culture columnist and creator of A Beautiful Resistance. And joining me today is Paula Champagne. Fun fact, she created all of the artwork and logo for ABR. She's a filmmaker and a nature-inspired artist and so much more, and a new mom. Congratulations. And we have Marty Fuller, who is the star of Marty and the Whites, who is a naturist and an advocate and an inspiration. You should really follow her on Instagram. I'll let her plug that. But I'm so excited to talk about Marty and the Whites. And for people who don't know, can you just tell them what the Whites are?
Sure. The Whites is a nickname for the White Mountains of New Hampshire that is on the land of the Wabanaki Confederacy, or the Abenaki. And it's a region, it also includes a bit of Maine. So it's a region mostly of New Hampshire and of Maine. That includes 48 peaks over 4,000 feet and lots of rivers and national forest land, and is a beautiful place to recreate.
I love that. Paula, what inspired you to make this film?
Well, Marty actually sent me this link to a grant, a film grant, and said, you should apply, just make it just make a grant application about something. And I was like, okay, well, I only will apply if it's about you. I think at that point she was maybe skeptical about her decision to send it to me. But I've known Marty for a long time, I think over 10 years at this point, but we've gotten closer in the past couple years as we've adventured in nature. And I've always known her as like the White Mountains person. She's like, every single weekend is out there. And my experience in that area, when I was working for a nonprofit that dealt mostly in the White Mountains. Every single time I was in the White Mountains adventuring, working there, I was the only Black person. And I found myself wanting Marty there and wanting other people that look like me. And so the first thing I thought about was I would love for Marty to tell her story about how and why she continues to come back to the space that is mostly white people, and it's hard. So that was kind of like how I got there.
Marty, what is your first hiking experience? Like, take us back to like that first experience that gave you the bug to be outdoors.
I think it's my internet connection that is choppy. Am I back?
You're back.
Oh, good. Sorry about that. Hopefully it doesn't happen again. I was raised by two Jamaican parents, Jamaican immigrants, and they both grew up in rural settings in Jamaica. And so being outside, being in nature was just part of their lifeblood. But this term hiking was not like a term to them, like taking a walk in nature was certainly important, but like this idea of having branding and gear attached to it and a specific culture attached to it, it's not something that's part of a Jamaican way of understanding nature. So I would say that I grew up loving being outside and loving going for walks. And then I, went on church hikes or camp hikes, summer camp hikes. And I just loved it. And when I got to college, I started to go hiking more in kind of like the American cultural way, and just loved it. I just loved being outside. I loved the breeze. I loved the sun. I loved to explore and see new places. I loved green, like the energy of trees and leaves. And it didn't seem like something that needed to be explained. It just felt like it was where I was meant to be.
I love that. I think a lot about just how, there's no one Black experience. We're not a monolith, but so often, so many of us grow up in neighborhoods where, we don't have access to hiking or even access to swimming pools or oceans and things like that. And I was reading this National Geographic story, and it said communities of color are almost 3 times more likely to live in nature-deprived areas than white communities. And 67% of Latino neighborhoods and 68% of Black neighborhoods are deprived of green spaces and trees and kind of just the ability to have nature. And you mentioned some of that in this film, what it is to kind of why it is important for us to have nature and why it's ours too. Can you speak to a little bit about that? The injustice, when we talk about environmental injustice, a lot of times we talk about factors that are important like pollution and things like that, but we forget about the actual spatial injustice that exists.
Yes, exactly, Janae. I would start by taking it even a lot further back. What you mentioned is critical, but if you even just go back to the founding of this country, American ideas of nature, of preservation and conservation, you think about John Muir or Gifford Pinchot, these quote unquote founding fathers of preservation and conservation, who, imagined the national parks and created the National Forest Service. These processes, the ideas as well as the practical preservation and conservation processes, they were shaped alongside the US nation building project, which was predicated on the genocide of the indigenous nations and the enslavement of Black people, and on the creation of a whole new white European identity for this land that we called the United States. And people of color were never included in the narrative of who constitutes the citizenry of the US. And were not included, when these same white men created narratives around our natural spaces and who they are for. And they kind of went out and said, this is this wide open space and wilderness, which was not true, because indigenous people had created systems of agriculture, had, been doing controlled burns. They had paths that were trading routes so that they could meet other nations and trade. Like, there were people everywhere. And yet we've had this white environmental ideology that said, this is now this clean slate for white men to tell their stories, and for Black people to, be working the land. So that's kind of where it started. And then when you add in, this idea of a natural world hierarchy with Black people as animals and white people above or outside of nature, this is where it all begins. Like, we were considered, we were engaged in chattel slavery. We were working the land, and after slavery, we had sharecropping. And then we moved into this time where there was white terrorism and targeting that could often happen in the woods, lynching happening in the woods. So much impacts Black folks' historical relationship to the outdoors. And then lack of access kind of comes from these systems and these ideas. And then, you've got all this generational trauma we're dealing with. So then you move into this period of, you mentioned like the creation of our urban spaces and the lack of resources that our neighborhoods have received. and lack of park space and lack of lake or beach access, even if these spaces were near lakes and beaches, lack of pool access. Parks were segregated in the Jim Crow era. So it all adds up, and it's all evident if we were simply to look at the history and talk about the history, right? But we don't. We are willfully ignorant about it. And I love bringing these facts to the surface. And I think it's just so, it's so liberating as a Black person to understand how this is all intermediated my relationship to nature, and allows me to deconstruct, examine, and then go in and build and rebuild what was there in terms of our true connection.
Well, and it's such a natural, I think so much about water a lot. And just how it's always calling to us. It's the saltwater baptism that is ours. And, our ancestors had to work this land and cultivate this land, and they were brought here by water, those who survived. And then this thing happens, and you speak to that, Jim Crow era, and it's like we go from being enslaved to this facade of freedom. And there's a moment in which we are building things again, and that are ours and not for other people. And then that's taken from us. We have bombings and terrorist attacks and segregation and redlining. And it creates this fear where when we're not dealing with access hurdles, there's fear. There's genuine fear of the woods and fear of the mountains and fear of the pool and the ocean, which goes back to the trauma you were talking about, the inherited trauma, the number of people of color who cannot swim or just are too scared to learn. And people talk about that a lot, sometimes in jest, and it's not funny. It's like this skill that has been stripped and instilled with fear because of terroristic things that happen to us. And the same thing with hiking. And I'm thinking about what you said, Paula, about, you would hike and you'd be the only one out there and you would want Marty there with you. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between when you're alone and when? One of my favorite scenes in the film is there's this scene towards the end and you all are kind of hiking in this sisterhood. And it's just, it's like I don't even think it's 20 seconds, but it's just this beautiful scene that just filled me with so much joy.
Oh, sorry, what was the question? Was he talking
Why,
about
how it feels when you're alone out there and you're the only Black person versus when you have other Black people with you?
It's a stark difference. I feel like I've developed my relationship with nature in the past maybe 6 or 7 years, where I've recognized what it is and developed it. And it was through hiking, and often in the White Mountains. And there was just such a dichotomy of feeling. It was like I would feel such joy just being in the wild, being in the woods, being amongst the trees, but I would also feel like deeply sad at the same time, just socially. And being able to be out in the woods with other people that look like me, it kind of mirrored how I felt about the nature part. So it was just like a holistic, like beautiful feeling. I didn't feel like that disconnect. I know it's hard to describe.
I love that.
What about for you, Marty?
Yeah, so as I talk about in the film, I had spent most of my hiking career mostly being with white folks, and a lot of them were really nice, and a lot of them are my friends, and even the most anti-racist white folks still don't share my experience of life, right? And then, of course, I often ended up spending time with folks who were not too far along in their anti-racism journey. maybe somewhere along the spectrum of like, maybe they were like in the colorblind kind of phase or state, or just maybe they had a lot of questions or about race or about me and my experience as a Black person, but they didn't necessarily have a lot of the learning and knowledge and to help them be able to ask questions in a way that was just either supportive or non-invasive. And then there were certainly folks who, and I think I said this a few times, like I felt like they were committed to the invisibility of whiteness. Like as long as I showed up and spoke in their culture and did not kind of show up as Black, they were fine and they liked me and they wanted me around. But if I, really wanted to be my full self, it would make them visibly anxious. Or maybe they would say something inappropriate, or maybe they would say something racist. But like, there's this whole spectrum. And I just didn't realize that I had spent so much time tiptoeing around that instead of being myself. And so when I began to make connections with other Black folks who wanted to hike and kayak and climb and whatnot, be, in nature, maybe even just hanging out, it doesn't have to be doing sports. It was just kind of this release, like, oh my gosh, I'm at home. I can be present. I don't have to explain my humor. I don't have to explain my phraseology. I could just be like, I don't have to explain why my hair is doing what it's doing right now.
Oh man.
So
that's just like a hard trigger. I'm like,
you know.
I as a South End representer, I know even when I'm not in nature, when I'm just walking my dog in the South End, it wasn't until people saw me in a magazine last year when I'd lived in this neighborhood for 3 years. And then last year when I was named like on some list of like influential Bostonians, suddenly my neighbors who had been seeing me for years and would look at me with that look, kind of like an unease, suddenly were talking to me, and it was like, oh, she's okay now. And there's that, and I say that to speak to the code switching thing, or the like that sense of ease, or like, are they gonna call the police on me, or are they gonna like ask the building manager why I'm here? It's just, there's these, and I'm telling this story because we've all, Paula has left us for the Northwest, but still we all have lived in New England. And when you're Black in New England, there's this thing that happens, one, where no one thinks Black people live in New England, and which is crazy considering, I know Boston is not the whole of New England, but Boston, greater Boston is a quarter Black. So it's like Black people are here. And I know our numbers are far less in New Hampshire and Vermont and Maine. It's like way smaller, minuscule numbers, but still we're here. And there is this isolating feeling. And I feel like when you take it to nature, when you take it to the beaches, to the woods, kayaking, or on the Charles, it's almost like a reflection or even bigger illustration of how isolating the existence can be. I wanted to ask you about creating groups, because I know there's like Outdoor Afro and Girl Trek and different groups that exist so that Black people can adventure together.
Yeah, so I am a volunteer leader with Outdoor Afro. So, obviously gonna give a shout out. It's a remarkable organization that's been around, I think 12 years at this point. I actually, right at the moment, I'm in Bozeman, Montana, on my way to Colorado, where Outdoor Afro is having our annual leadership training. There are 100 volunteer leaders around the country. I want to say we're in 53 cities, but if I'm off, don't come at me, please. But it's on the website, outdoorafro.com. And the organization exists to connect Black people to nature and tell our stories. And they're very emphatic. I think they're very emphatic about health and wellness and nature. And you could connect in any way you want. You could, go out to Birdwatch or Nature Journal, or you could go ice climbing. Like, these are all events that happen within, within the same period of time across the country. And it's been life-giving for me. When I became a leader, when I first started going to Outdoor Afro events, I was just going to meet other Black people who like being outside and like to do outdoor sports. And when I was asked like if I might be willing to be a volunteer leader, I realized that I was spending a lot of time introducing white people to hiking and camping in backcountry. Like, they were asking me questions about where to go in the White Mountains, or they were asking me to take them on their first backpacking trip. And I was like, wait, love your friend, but this is not the group that need to intro them to the wilderness. Like, let's find my people. So I'm thrilled to be a volunteer leader. If you're in Boston and you're Black, we do events. There are 4 leaders. We have a group on meetup.com. Check us out, come through. Would love to see you.
We have a question from Jill. It's a 2-parter from Jill G. Jill, I respect you. I don't want to butcher your name. That's why I'm making it Jill G, as someone who has a name that gets butchered often. Jill would like to know how we change Black loneliness in our local woods, and are there programs for Black youth? And I would like to add on to that, what can our city do? Like, what can not just our city, but local governments do to be better about ensuring Black people and other folks of color are welcome into nature?
I mean, Outdoor Afro is a huge one. Not specifically for youth, though. Do they have a youth component too? I guess they do have youth come to some events. Marty?
Yeah, so Outdoor Afro focuses on family engagement. Mm-hmm. Outdoor Afro doesn't specifically do youth events, but there will be either family-friendly events or just encouragement that folks should come as a family to events. I would say one great thing about the Blue Hills, just 5 miles outside of Boston, I'm in the Blue Hills usually like twice a week, just exercising, hiking. The great thing is that like you'll always see a ton of Black folks there. Like, I've never felt more comfortable in a wooded environment than there, because there are a lot of Black folks. There's a great community in the summer and fall, kind of climbing up the big ski hill from the base to the top of Great Blue Hill. Like, if you park at the Trailside Museum parking lot, that's a recommendation for folks. That's you've got to have a mobility and ability to climb up a hill, but you'll see tons of Black folks and everyone's like cheering each other on. I just love the vibe. So, I'd say, in answer to the question, I think it's just really about, groups like Outdoor Afro or Boston While Black or whatever the group is, coming together and doing events together. I think that the answer's here, the answer's in our own community in terms of support and initiative. Now, of course, there are structural, even political, systemic barriers that need to come down, but like, I'm a big proponent of like, let's do our best to solve this from within. Find a buddy, start with something you feel really comfortable with and get out there, or join a group.
Absolutely. And there's also so many, you know, Queens Co., which was founded by Jessica Pierre, used to do a summer hike every summer. I don't know if they still do it because Jessica is now chief of comms for Mayor Wu. And congratulations, Jessica, if you're out there. But there's so many run groups in our, one thing I'll say our city does well is we have a lot of Black run groups. And I think some of those run groups occasionally will go out further into nature to experience things together. So I think just really Googling and looking around for people who, people who are asking, you'll be surprised at the number of groups that'll come up. Paula, this is your first film, correct?
It's hard because I've done a lot of short films but they were used for marketing purposes. So this is my first film that's just to tell the story. There's no agenda. Nobody is like the boss. Nobody is approving anything. So this is in some ways my first film.
What has it been like for you to do something that's not marketing, non-advertorial, that's like your own vision with no boss? Like, this is Paula's. I can't front. I like clapped even from my living room when it was like a film by Paula Champagne.
Thank you. And it feels great. It feels, especially telling our story. There's been so many times where I'm told to tell a story about Black folks, and the person who is approving it does not look like us, and their comments that they make are very limiting. And it's been so liberating to be able to just be like authentically tell this story. Feels great. Yeah, I feel proud of it. There's always everything I'd done before this that had had a marketing sort of thing to it had kind of an asterisk. It's like I felt proud, but like I wish it didn't have to be about So it feels great.
It's beautiful. It's poetic. It's visually stunning. The story, Marty, I could just watch you talk. And so much of it, for people who don't know, please look up Paula's work at MakerChamp on Instagram and paulachampagne.com, right?
Yes.
Paula is and something you touched on was the white gaze. Like, this is, normally you would have to answer to someone who doesn't look like you. And one of the reasons I even know Paula is because I needed art to go with a very Black series, A Beautiful Resistance. And I didn't want to rely on someone who wasn't Black to understand the vision. And someone who wasn't Black had drawn a picture of me that was deeply offensive and looked nothing like me. And I also needed a picture of me drawn. And Paula's work called to me because of how soulful and innately natural it is. Like, everyone's always kind of near a moon or being hugged by a plant, and it's done in this way that just touches you. It really does touch you. It's like having a song sung to you, except the person is drawing. And so can you talk a little bit about why, because your art truly does center Black people in nature. Can you talk about that purpose and what it is that calls to you about that?
I think I'm just creating what I wish I saw growing up. And as I've worked through like what my relationship with nature and how important it is for me as a Black woman, there's been like a healing that's been happening. And so all the work that I've been doing that I do for myself, that I do just for my young self too, the things that I wish that I saw when I was young, is at the intersection of my identity as a Black woman and nature. And then also rest is a part of it too. One of the things that I didn't like about the hiking culture when I was interacting with a lot of the people in the White Mountains specifically, was that everything was, you have to be the most intense. You have to, like, as Marty was saying in the film, like everything is about conquering. It's very typical of all of most hiking communities in America, at least. And so rest is a big part of that to me too, because the way that I feel that I am best connected to nature, the way that I feel my best is a more restful approach to it. It's not necessarily to me about the conquering of things. Even like my approach to the film, Marty has done so many incredible things and has like she's the only Black person that's ever hiked all 4,000 footers in New Hampshire in the winter. But I didn't even want to make it about that, because it's like, it's not even about the conquering. It's about her feeling whole. So that my art is about that. I wanted this to be about that feeling, and to like just like leave the colonialism and the white gaze aside. Like, that's not what it's about. It's about us.
I need that now. I need a gif of that now, Marty, so I can just
Boy, bye.
We have two different questions, but they're kind of the same from two different audience members. The one is a woman who is a member of the Appalachian Mountain Club, and another one is from Dark Night Sky and Stars Association. And they both are asking, should there be chapters specifically for people of color, or are there better ways to encourage engagement in the groups?
So the way that I would answer that question would be, I think I would just say the starting point needs to be, how can white-led organizations that are hoarding money relinquish some of that money and power to Black-led initiatives or BIPOC-led initiatives? I don't necessarily want a Black chapter of the AMC. I want my own group, maybe it's a group that already exists, maybe it's a new group, that is Black-centered, tells Black stories, addresses Black needs, and is led by Black people. That's what's needed. I think there are some organizations that have missed some opportunities to better engage with these communities, the AMC being one of them. I think it's just critical for large, wealthy, white-led organizations to recognize that they need to do the internal work. Some of that's personal, some of that is corporate in their institutions, so that they are not going out and creating programs that are paternalistic or like steeped in white saviorism. And then, bringing these to Black or brown communities and saying, look, we have this thing for you, come participate in it. The best partnerships that I have observed from white-led organizations are the ones that say, hey, can we get to know you? If we can support you, we'd love to. We're not coming in with ideas of what we think you need. We want to hear from you as to who you are, what we're doing, what we can learn from you, how we can change this broader culture. And so that would be the starting point for that question. Of course, maybe there are particular resources or programs that this white-led organization actually does have that I want as a community member. And that's a more specific conversation, but generally, I'm not looking to be an addendum to a white-led organization. I'm looking for power and money to be allocated properly and for historical injustices to be rectified. And I'm looking for groups to be led and leadership and power to be in the hands of those who they're trying to represent.
Absolutely. Both of you hike, both of you adventure outdoors. What is it that you've learned about yourself through hiking? Paula, you want to go first?
Sure. I think I grew up thinking that like hiking couldn't possibly be for me. And ironically, as I've done more, like much more challenging hikes, I've recognized that some of the smaller things that I was already doing when I was younger was already basically hiking. It's just walking. So like, that's all it is. It's walking outside. So as I have done it, hiking with like the official label now, it has just made me notice things in the everyday too. Like I have this local park I live next to. It's not really a hike. It's just like a little trail. It's lovely. And I noticed little things that I think I would have never noticed if I didn't get into like the hiking sort of community. So I've learned that it was in me all along. Like me climbing trees when I was a little girl, like that was my connection to nature being expressed in a way that I just didn't know. I didn't know what to call it because I also didn't see anyone calling that outdoorsy. I didn't see anyone recognizing that as a true connection to nature. So that's something I've learned. I've kind of, yeah, it's been here along.
That's lovely. Marty?
Well, I'm a person who can't sit still. Like, you know, as a little girl, my mom like trying to do my hair, aunties trying to do my hair, like earliest memories of my fidgety nature. And I'm also such a head person. I'm fairly practical. I have a hard time processing my feelings and emotions without being distracted. So just the movement, the meditation and the rhythm of movement really calms me down, just gets me in a mental space where I can be at peace, I can connect better with myself, I can feel my feelings instead of thinking my feelings, which is what I tend to do. And so, yeah, I don't think I've come close to unearthing all of the ways that hiking heals me and nature heals me. I can't articulate it. That's going to be a lifelong journey, but it just makes me feel like I'm myself.
Yeah, I always call the ocean a saltwater baptism. I haven't hiked enough. Well, I have hiked, but not enough to find the poetic descriptor for it. I'm gonna have to do more. I do more city hiking than anything else. I'm a power city walker.
It's all, you know, wonderful.
When we've talked a lot about access and that being one of the biggest hurdles for being Black in nature. There's a lot of questions about public transit and naming and things like that right now in the chat. I have my own thoughts on this, but I really want to, Alan wants to know, what do you think of changing the name of Little Haystack Mountain in the White Mountains to Mount Obama to excite and interest Black and brown youth to hike in the White Mountains and support Michelle Obama's Let's Move initiative?
I would say I like the spirit of that question, because I think that the person who asked that surely knows that all of the neighboring names of the mountains around there are Washington, Jefferson, Franklin, Monroe, like Lafayette, Lincoln. So I don't think I would even call it a renaming that needs to happen. It's like a return to original naming. Mount Washington is also known as Agiokochuk in the Abenaki language. And I'm by no means an expert on this at all, but I talked to one Abenaki gentleman about what some of the other names might have been. And what he'd said was that, you know, his people had mostly been focused on naming the rivers and like other access ways and hadn't necessarily been focused on naming mountains. That's not stated from expertise. This is just like a conversation I had. But anyway, I would say returning names, place names to the original names would be my default. And if the Abenaki or other indigenous people would give permission for other namings, then, you know, it would be great to have some Black names in there, but I certainly think that these mountains shouldn't all be named after the settler colonists. I would also point out that the Cowasuk Band of the Abenaki is engaged in a process in the New Hampshire legislature right now to return place names around the region to their original naming. So I would put my efforts into supporting that first.
There we go. Paula, do you want to add anything?
I don't think I have anything. A great answer. I didn't know about this because I'm not as plugged in as Marty.
No, it's perfect. I think if we want to, I think everything Marty said, plus if we want to get brown and Black youth and youth of color, period, excited about the outdoors, we should start by getting them access to the outdoors and taking them, field trips. I went on a field trip into the woods when I was little. I don't know why those things stopped, but that speaks to resources and money and funding and the role that city funding and local governments play in creating resources. Again, outdoorafro.com. I know I've said it a couple times, but it's just, let's support things. I want to give a shout out to one of our guests in the audience, and that's Allison Simmons. She says, thanks for the beautiful film. She spent 2 years at White Mountain School as one of 2 Black students and always felt that nature is an equalizer and felt so free outdoors. She wants to thank you both for opening up the conversation about how we as people of color should remain comfortable in the outdoor environment and be ourselves. Thank you so much, Allison.
I also want to say thank you, Allison. I went to private high school outside of New York City. I grew up in New York, went to a high school in the suburbs, and I think all 3 of us here know intimately what it is to navigate a primarily white institution in a primarily white space, and then to do so in an area that is like almost 100% white, in the White Mountains, at least not New Hampshire. That really, we could have a whole nother Zoom just about that. And so I just thank you for being here, and just wish you the best on your continuing identity journey.
And we see you. I mean, we can't see you, but we see you. I think that's such Marty pointing out that we've all been there. Everyone on the Zoom, all 3 of us have navigated these kind of spaces. So just, you're not alone, and we see you and we lift you. Caitlin would like to know what advice you would share with beginning hikers who are trying to, build up their strength and perseverance as you were once a beginner and now you're an expert hiker.
Sure. I would say, well, I'm not sure which level of advice she wants, but I will say this. Look at weather and conditions and find a buddy and do something moderate with some sort of payoff, whatever the payoff is for you. Maybe that's a summit, maybe it's a mushroom hike, maybe it's, going in time to see a bloom of a flower. And I would also say, mind your joints, do the strengthening exercises you need to be in this for the long haul. I say this as someone in early middle age, perhaps. Lots of chronic pain.
We have another question about what it means to be a woman in hiking in such a male-dominated path, so to speak.
I think that's part of being a Black woman, especially, there's like this double fear in being in the woods, especially I've hiked by myself, of being a Black person and a woman, where there's all of these men and they're scary. They can be scary. So to me, it's not even, it's like physical, there's physical double fear at least for me, in my experiences. And then in the field, at being a filmmaker, especially in the outdoor industry, it's just almost all white men. So then that's a whole nother ballpark. Marty and I actually went to a film festival together. I won't name which one, but it was an outdoor film festival. And it was just like all white. And then the one black one, they still centered whiteness somehow, because of course it was made by white people. So it's just, to make work that is so dramatically different from that is tough, but like a fun challenge, I think.
Yeah, it's like, all right, folks, need to get the message that telling, like white folks telling a Black story is not it.
Nope, it's not doing it.
Not it. Controlling the funding and the narrative and then presenting that as diversity. That's not what we're trying to do.
Listen, that's why I created A Beautiful Resistance.
Yeah.
So on that note, what makes your lives a beautiful resistance?
Daring to be joyful even, and I try to seek it every day. And the way that I do it is by going outside.
I love it. Marty?
Ooh. Yeah, my beautiful resistance, especially in this context, is just my insistence on being present here in my full self and no longer tiptoeing around whiteness as I described earlier, and bringing my joy and my growing freedom to these spaces that ask me to conform to them, and I'm not doing it.
We not doing it. We are not doing it.
Oh.
Nobody here is doing it.
No.
Before we close out, first, I want to remind everybody that you'll be getting a newsletter or an email that kind of recaps everything. You'll be able to watch the film again. There'll be links to websites like yeskids.org. Shout out to Lisa Simmons, Kawasuck.org, and just pretty much everything we mentioned will be recapped in an email. So don't freak out and worry that you'll miss anything. Paula, what is next for you? This was such a gorgeous film, and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you. Currently, I'm being a mom. I don't know what project's next, but it's probably going to be about Blackness and nature, because it's just the core of everything I do. But taking a little break right now.
Congratulations, Mama. And then Marty, you are about to go through outdoor Afro training. Did I get that right?
Yes, our annual training.
Your annual training. So what is your next hike? What is your next journey? What is your next adventure?
Sure. Well, I've been learning to ski this winter, which has been a blast. I'm going to ski a bit while I'm out here in the Mountain West. And got some summer backpacks planned. I'm going to Alberta, Canada, doing a 5-day backpack that I'm organizing with a friend whose home I'm in right now. And also doing more writing about, Black perspectives in nature and the advocacy for equitable access. So yeah, exciting stuff on the horizon.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. Please continue to tune into Globe Sustainability Week and GlobeDocs. And I am not going to miss out on a chance to shout out Lisa Simmons and the 24th anniversary of the Roxbury Film Festival, where I am just about 99.9% sure you'll be seeing this amazing film again. So thank you all for being with us. Have a wonderful Tuesday night. And everybody who is Black, just be Black and beautiful in nature.
And that's it. That's all you got to do. And Janae, you got to come out for a hike. Organize a hike.
You have given me permission. I'm gonna come hike, and I really actually learning to ski is on my bucket list. So now you saying that has made me be like, okay, like Let's do this. So
Let's do
thank you
it.
guys. Shout out to Christella. I saw her up in the chat. So keep beautifully resisting, everyone. Bye.
Bye.